This is TWiT.
Sure, there are other podcasts about Microsoft you could listen to, but ask yourself this, baby. How many have the brown liquor segment? Presented by Sir Richard Campbell. That's right. There's only one. Windows Weekly.
This has become a thing, hasn't it?
Yes, I love it. Thank you, Joe.
I popped down. It was July 4th recently. Maybe you noticed. And it's fun for a Canadian to come down and experience the madness. It's July 4th, especially in a rural area. Because
where did you go?
Sounds like I went to Snohomish.
Snohomish.
Yeah, Snohomish is the county north of King County, where Seattle and Redmond and all those places are. And largely a rural area. And I was staying with a friend and who's got a property amongst all the hobby and horse farms. And we're in the kind of area where they make their own fireworks.
Oh, yeah.
So the explosions are pretty much continuous for that day, go till the wee hours of the morning. They literally had to sedate their dog. It was that distressing. And it was an opportunity to drink some bourbon. And in fact, I did. And this is I was introduced to the Bolster Road Maple Rye Whiskey, which is made by J.P. Trodden, which is based in Snohomish. It's one of the new style distilleries. It was using the new tax code. A fellow by the name of Mark Nesheim, who comes from the restaurant biz, decided he was ready for a new career in the early 2000s and set up J.P. Trodden in Woodinville back in 2010. He named it for his grandfather, J.P. Trodden, who was in the private mail delivery business back in the day. There, and in fact, these still exist today. The U.S. Postal Service had routes that you could contract out, typically these rural postal routes, and J.P. Trodden had what they call the star route. Star route is a general term for these rural postal routes where they have stars instead of the zip code, and an area known as Okanagan Hills, which is actually central northern Washington, crossing into British Columbia. And his grandfather worked in the 30s during Prohibition and was known on occasion to be over on the wet side, as they said, and then came back with
you guys
things.
Didn't have Prohibition in Canada?
Nope. Only the Americans are crazy enough to do that. That's why just down the road from me is Smuggler's Cove,
right?
And all these sorts of things.
It's a short smuggle. Yeah.
And so, apparently his grandfather, I don't know how much of the story is actually apocryphal. It's a good one. This is a very well-branded whiskey. You've got a very Washington State vibe to it. Today, those star routes are now known as highway contract routes. And interesting enough, very likely the road that J.P. Trodden went down was what they now call the 97 Highway. It's called the 97 Highway, both in Washington State and in British Columbia, just to make it contiguous. And it does run through the wine region we call the Okanagan.
Okanagan.
Just a few, some evidence of the nature of the J.P. Trodden distillery. So Mark sets up this thing in 2010. He does not make any vodka or gin. He decides to only make bourbon. So clearly he had money because it takes a few years before you actually get a bourbon. So he was he was basically working by himself for several years. But he did stick strictly with Washington products. So he bought corn and winter wheat from a particular farm in Quincy, Washington. And the mash bill is a 70-30 split of corn and winter wheat. He does a very slow maturation, so a long steeping period before they do the full mash, a 7-day long ferment. And he got an American still rather than going to the Scots. He had it built in Oregon. And I met that still because we went to the distillery. And it is a lambic still. It is a large lambic still. The lambic stills are the sort of traditional, like the Greeks had lambic stills. This is the way stuff like Armagnac and thing is made. So Mark had able to get a still made that he really liked in this lambic style, and he still runs it. And it's the only still he has. So to make a bourbon, he has to actually run it through twice, which is not that unusual. Just speaks to they don't make a lot. They're just not that fast in production. And of course, because it's bourbon, he ages it in American oak barrels. So, nobody pays much attention to a one-man band trying to make whiskey, but within 5 years, he wins double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits for a small batch, which is impressive. And at that point, of course, the sales just hockey stick upwards. He starts positioning his whiskey in a bunch of nice restaurants because he used to be in the restaurant business. He knows what he's doing. And by 2020 needs a larger facility. So now he moves out of King County, which has very high taxes, into Snohomish, just to the north there, in a little town called Maltby. Right by the big flour wholesaler is where it was. It's in a very industrial area. He's still using the same stills, but he's got a lot more processing and storage area, and also an awesome tasting room. And you can take a tour. And they have a membership program. It's $400 a year, but you get these special events. You get a certain number of free drinks. And my friend was there, so we tried everything. Of course you do. And he's kind of gone. See if you've recognized these names. So his base product, the one that won that small batch edition, which is at 45% alcohol, is now called the Black Label. And then he has that's a 3-year-old product. Then he has a 4-year-old product they now call the Red Label. And he also makes a 4-year-old product at cast strength called the Green Label. And then a 6-year called the Blue Label. And
I like these bottles. They look kind of old fashioned.
Very straightforward.
Yeah.
But the one we tried was the Maple Rye Whiskey. And it's different because it is only 50% of the small batch, the Black Label, and 50% of a rye whiskey made for the purpose.
Huh.
And then he combines the two together, and it spends a year in a maple syrup barrel, which is bizarre, right? Because listen, I'm from Canada, and Quebec has the maple syrup strategic reserve, and they definitely store they store several million pounds.
That it's a strategic.
Oh, it is very strategic. They also had a huge theft, right? People stole millions of dollars of the maple syrup. But those are metal drums they store it in. So the idea of storing in wood is weird because maple syrup is almost entirely sugar, although admittedly it's like 67% sugar, which is almost completely bacterial hostile. But you have to be careful with syrup. If it can go bad. You can have bacterial growth and stuff on it. But typically, this is sort of a hip thing with the chef crowd that they started aging bourbon in maple syrup barrels and vice versa, aging maple syrup in bourbon barrels. And so this is what Mark got into with this bit of cross flavoring. The real question here is, we know with barrel aging and getting the flavors out of the wood, it's mostly about the alcohol, the solvent aspect. How the heck does this work with syrup? And the answer is that they heat the barrel a bit when they're storing maple syrup in it to get more maple syrup into the wood and then pick up more wood flavors into maple syrup. So he takes these maple syrup barrels and he puts his bourbon in it for a while, and they pull up a little bit of the flavors. And it's true. They can absolutely taste it. It's got a unique, slightly sweeter character, which you think you would have gotten from the corn, but it's got a real maple syrup flair to it. So a lovely whiskey, very drinkable. Definitely
nice color too. So it's not a bourbon though, because it's rye.
Well, it's nominally a bourbon because it's made in the bourbon style.
Yeah,
but it's not because of the change in aging. It's still because of the change in aging. It would not nominally qualify. So that's why he's calling it a maple rye whiskey.
Hey, speaking of that, sorry, because this just came up last night. Go figure. This is probably shocking. I spend time in bars sometimes. Someone said that to qualify as a bourbon, it had to be made in Kentucky. And I was like, I don't think that.
No, that's the FDA regulations is anywhere in America.
Okay.
But
so you couldn't make a bourbon in France.
No, but you can make a bourbon style whiskey.
Even if it's a French word, you can't make it in France.
Yeah.
I think that you probably have heard of this. It was called 1792, and it's well, the way I think it was just it's a bourbon, but it is made in Kentucky actually. But there's like a what do you call it? A butter washed version, that is surprisingly awesome. But
sometimes when they play like that, they violate the rules, right? There's been all kinds of tricks to avoid violating the rules, but Angel's Envy blew that up because once Lincoln Henderson said, "Listen, we're going to age in sherry casks, and you need to get over it," because Lincoln Henderson is like one of the godfathers of American bourbon. They went, "Okay, we'll change the rules." But does it really mean, why is Jack Daniel's not a bourbon? It's called a Tennessee whiskey, not because it's in Tennessee, but because they do a maple charcoal filtration step, which is against the rules.
Right.
That's the only.
Who makes those rules? The Bourbon Associates of America, or
Big Bourbon, Leo?
Big Bourbon.
No, you're not wrong. Typically, you go to the FDA, and this is true of all kinds of products. You go to the government regulators and say, "Hey, we want a standard," because other people are calling their stuff the same name as our stuff, and their stuff is awful. So this is, we talked about this when we were talking about Japanese whiskey, because it's only been in the past 15 so years that the Japanese have established a standard. And it's because when there was only Nikkei and Yamazaki, everything was fine. But now that there's another 30 something distilleries in Japan, they decided they needed a standard, and it tends to be written by the incumbents.
Yeah.
Because they kind of know what they're doing.
We know what bourbon is because we make it.
That's right. And so, but the joke, of course, is that even the great bourbon makers are saying our rules are too strict and we should tinker with it a bit. So that's fine. The Scots do the same thing with barley only, but any kind of barrel, right? They go all over the map with barrels. The Irish go, put whatever you want in, like they're groovy. Just make it in Ireland. And the same thing's happening here with bourbon. So JP Trodden does definitely make a bourbon. They follow the traditional rules for their black label and the other color labels, very much like Green Spot or very much like Johnny Walker. They're using the same colors, which is funny. Their most expensive version is called blue. But this maple is off the side of that a little bit. At 45%, it's interesting. It couldn't get any details on exactly where it's getting his rye from. I wouldn't be surprised if it came from Alberta. Alberta Distillers, which she talked about last week, just because they're the guys who make 100% rye.
Yeah.
It's $60 a bottle. It is only sold directly. There's relatively few stores carry. Can't find it at Total Wine or anything like that. They will do delivery, but only to certain states that allow it. That includes Arizona and California, Iowa, Nevada, New Mexico, and Oregon.
I can assure you it does not include Pennsylvania.
No.
It does not include Pennslude. And in Montana, only in Missoula for some reason.
That's amazing.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, it's very funny. Yeah. And oddly enough, going to be in Missoula in August. So there you go.
That's great.
But the other thing is, after they make the bourbon with those syrup barrels, they refill it with syrup and they sell that syrup.
Oh, bourbon maple syrup. Now we're talking.
Syrup. So it's like back and forth, barrels being used everywhere.
Yep.
Why waste a good barrel?
Have like a low buzz at breakfast. It's nice.
They do make a note on the maple syrup to say there is no alcohol in this.
Yeah. I've seen bourbon aged maple syrup. I've seen all kinds of interesting maple syrup.
Yeah, people are playing around. Oddly enough, I noticed that the latest Whiskey Weekly that's gone up on the playlist is the one with the Hellier's Road Harmony No. 3, which was the barrel that made whiskey, then made beer, then went back and made whiskey again. Like this, moving barrels around into different markets is becoming a popular thing, just to experiment, to try different approaches. And it's the same thing happening here. And so legit, this was a nice whiskey for a fair price. JD is still $20 and you can't go far wrong. But this is a much more boutique-y, small production kind of lot.
I like
it's a cool
that,
bottle.
Yeah.
Enjoyable. It was a winner.
I suppose it's not the case that boutique is always better than big, but I just like supporting the little guys,
Yeah. Well, and again, this is all that new tax rules making it more feasible. Like one of the things that Mark Nesheim's going to be up against, and his son's working there now, is as demand goes up and they start producing more, they're going to start bumping into excise taxes and things like that. And I think there's going to be a threshold where it's like, it's fine when you're making about 100,000 liters a year, but if you want to go over that, suddenly you need to make 1 million liters a year. Like you've got to suddenly go big.
Yeah, this is a Sam Adams problem.
Mm-hmm. But, he's also big on, he's very particular about his barrel selections for given batches. And most of these batches are like 3 or 4 barrels. So he's only making 1,000 liters at a go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tiny little batch.
Yeah. But, he's made whiskey that you can drink neat. And that's an achievement for something that's only existed for 15 years.
Right.
And nominally in this current location for only 5. Like he's pulled it off. Well done. Impressive.
Lovely. Well, I'll tell you what, we've just done the whiskey segment. You know what that means. It's time to go have some. It's time to go drink some whiskey.
Well, the bottle I had did not make it out of July 4th, which happens. So
do not handle fireworks and whiskey at the same time.
No, I did not touch any fireworks that whole day. I was not qualified to supervise.